Welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, practical and actionable steps that you can take to help manifest the greatness that you already possess deep inside. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, where we explore practical and actionable steps that you can take to help manifest the greatness that you already possess deep inside. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Amberley Snyder. And Amberley was born in Southern California. And at the age of 3, Amberley began riding lessons and developed an unyielding passion for horses. And after her dad's retirement from baseball, the family moved to Utah. And Amberley, 7 at the time, refused to join them unless she was promised a barrel racing horse when she got there. Well, she got her wish, and that marked the beginning of Amberley's rodeo career. From a young age, Amberley was competing in barrel racing, pole bending, breakaway roping, and goat tying. In 2009, she qualified for the National High School Finals in the pole bending and won the National Little Britches Rodeo Association all-around cowgirl world title. A future in rodeo was looking incredibly bright for Amberley, but then on January 10th, 2010, she was on her way to the Denver Stock Show and Rodeo when passing through Sinclair, Wyoming. She took a look down at her map for just a few seconds, but when she looked up, she realized she had drifted into the other lane and was headed towards a metal beam. In an effort to get back in her lane, Amberley overcorrected. The truck slid off the road and rolled several times so violently that she was thrown from the vehicle and slammed into a fence post that broke her back. After 5 hours of emergency surgery, the doctor's prognosis was that she would never regain use of her legs and never regain feeling below her waist. The doctor told her that if she had worn a seatbelt, she would still be able to use her legs. And that one mistake she made that day changed her life forever, but it didn't defeat her competitive spirit. And after the accident, Amberley immediately got back into things, and her goal was not only to walk, but to ride her horses again. And only 4 months after the accident, she was back on her horse. And following the accident, Amberley also realized she had a unique opportunity to reach out and inspire people with her unconventional situation. Her first step towards that was her Wheelchair Wednesdays video segments on social media, where she would perform everyday tasks that have become more challenging but not impossible after her accident. And in 2015, Amberley was voted as the fan exemption contestant at the world's richest one-day rodeo, comparable to the Super Bowl, RFD TV's The American. She competed with the best in the industry and was just 0.6 seconds short of the winning time. She received a standing ovation from the 40,000 fans in AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas that day. And the following year, Amberley would secure a spot in the top 5 for the Rodeo Mountain Pro Association and win her Women's Professional Rodeo Association card. And then 6 years after her accident, Amberley's story of triumph out of tragedy would be featured on the Today Show on NBC. And in 2019, Netflix released the film Walk, Ride, Rodeo, a biopic based on her life that has reached over 350 million worldwide. Amberley continues to compete as a professional athlete, and she has become one of the most sought-after social influencers and motivational speakers in Western sports. And Amberley, I am so grateful that you've taken the time to get together today. Welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
And we spoke, of course, before this, and one of the things that I had mentioned to you that really was drawing me to have this conversation, not only your amazing story, but the history living in Utah. My daughter, I lived in Utah for 15 years in Sandy, and my youngest daughter, she's 13 now, but she started riding horses, and actually she started English riding and then moved over to rodeo or Western style riding when she was 8, and then she continued on until she was 10. She was looking forward to hopefully getting involved in the junior rodeo scene for junior high school. And and I just, after hearing about all of these similarities, I was like, oh my goodness, I'd love to have this opportunity to talk with you. And I just thought that was an amazing coincidence. So I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I feel like there was like lots of crossover that was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And barrel racing was actually her event of choice. So she was actually just getting into that when we moved to Hawaii a couple of years ago. And she just, of course, loves horses, and of course, it's very clear that you have as well, and you continue to do so. And I'm always just curious to know kind of the origin story of that love. I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about when you first felt that, horses were so meaningful and important and impactful in your life, and you had to be a part of them and everything they had to offer.
It's kind of a crazy story in the fact that I wasn't really raised in a horse family. My dad was a Major League Baseball player. My mom was a cheerleader. She had a horse when she was younger, but they didn't have the opportunity for her to compete. And when she at 1 years old saw the interest in me that I loved horses, she wanted to make sure it was possible. So that was where they found a place at 3 that I could start riding lessons. And of course, you could see the love that I had for it, right? It wasn't going to be just a phase. I think some parents hope that with their kids, it's going to just be a phase, but definitely not going to be that. I mean, it was absolutely where my love was. And when my family decided to move to Utah when I was 7, I told my dad I would only move with the family if he would buy me a Palomino barrel horse when we got there. And bless him, that's exactly what he did. And so it even, they provided it. They made it available for me to do, which I know that I'm lucky. Not that many children, right, who love horses have the opportunity to not only own them, but to compete on them and then continue that sport and love. And I was lucky enough. Your daughter was lucky enough to have the sport, to be able to have the support from you to do it too. And that's such a big part. I think just once you're a horse girl in your heart, it just doesn't go away.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's definitely not something that goes away. My daughter, even coming here, we live on the Big Island, and there is actually a pretty big horse. There's a big rodeo scene here on the Big Island. There's lots of rodeos that happen, especially in the summertime out here. And the love has definitely not gone away. And it's something that we're hoping to get her back involved in once things kind of settle down for us. We've only been out here for a little while, but yeah. And the love that she has for rodeo as well is just amazing to me, and it's something that she continues to be so inspired by, and she wants to definitely be able to participate in the years ahead. And I was just so curious, when did you first become aware of rodeo, and how did you decide that this is the arena that I want to be in with the horse?
I think it was just starting on those horses. So the place that I started riding in California, they weren't a barrel racing facility. They were just like a horsemanship. I think they did some other stuff too, but
Yeah.
my mom had wanted to be a barrel racer. She just didn't get the opportunity. So she would take my hand and she would trace the barrel pattern over and over and over, with a pen and paper or even on my palm. And so I think it was like, okay, I want to be a barrel racer. That's what I want to do. And then when I was actually given a barrel horse and was able to start barrel racing, then that's where it was really able to grow. And I mean, in Utah, they're everywhere. They're all the time. You can find a rodeo or a barrel race every single weekend. And so we just started going. And that love, that like, okay, I love horses. This is what I want to do, was able to turn into all right, I can be competitive. I can be good at this. This is what I want to be. And I
Yeah.
think that's the shift, is now it became a part of who I am as a person. And yeah, I mean, that has just continued to grow my whole life.
Yeah, and you're right. I do miss that environment where it was just so easy to find an event basically any time. So, yeah, that was a fantastic environment for her to be exposed to Western riding and to rodeo and everything. Definitely lots of great memories. And you had mentioned that your siblings, you grew up in a very competitive environment, right? And I was curious, was it competitive amongst siblings or just with their individual sports? What was that environment like growing up in a household? Especially, your father, of course, he played for the Dodgers, right? He was a professional.
Yes.
Yeah. So how was that like growing up in that environment?
So I tell people that I think I had the perfect combination of parents, because my dad, being a big league baseball player and was a first round draft pick and made the Olympics and played for 8.5 years, he knew what it took to be the best. And he expected that from his kids. He expected us to have that attitude and that drive, and that I'm not just going to be a participant, but I'm a competitor attitude. And my dad was like that. I mean, at 7 years old, right? If I got in the truck and I took second place, he would say that was first loser. And some people are like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy, that your dad was that strict. I'm like, yeah, it's sometimes I was like, gosh, this is kind of hard. But I look back on it now and I think, no, like that is really what ingrained in me, that you have to continue to work to be the best. But on the counter side, my mom, she was the one that would remind us, like, even if you don't win, you have value, right? Like that doesn't determine if you are valuable. And I think the combination between them is really what built all six of us kids, there's six kids in my family, to have that competitive mentality. And we're competitive. I mean, ask us any card game we play in our household or board game. I mean, it's competitive for
Yeah.
sure. And everything is a competition. It doesn't matter if we go out and we were playing. I mean, when I was younger, and we'd go out and we'd ride four-wheelers or bikes or skate. I mean, everything turns into a competition, right? There's going to be that somewhere. And it still does. I see it at our family reunions, and I watch, it's not just my family, right? It's really my dad's whole family. Everything turns into a competition. Like, okay, who can be the best at this? Who can win this? And we've always been like that. I mean, and that's just the way that our brains have been shaped. As siblings, I tell you, the only person I'm really okay with beating me in the arena is my littlest sister. She's the one who competes with me. Everyone else, I'm like, okay, I get that they got me that day or whatever, but she's the only one that I'm actually, all right, I can take second place to my sister and I'm okay with that. So I think it really is probably against other people more than it is as siblings, especially as we get older. I can tell as we get older, we have definitely recognized that having the good relationship and having fun and being able to enjoy each other's company is more important than winning. I don't think that applies to other people though. I think that's just for us.
Yeah, well, I find that amazing. And that was something, as a father, I have two girls, and that's something that really resonated with me when just learning more about the family and the dynamics and the competitive spirit. And yeah, in the documentary, and congratulations, by the way, that was fantastic. I loved it. I
Thank
loved it. I loved it. And it's a very moving, very vulnerable, and just a very inspirational journey. So I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to take that journey through that movie, Walk, Ride, Rodeo. And one of the things that your father says in the documentary is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And it sounds like something exactly like something I would say. And I'm pushing my kids, my girls, to be competitive in their sports. And I'm trying to, of course, I'm very sensitive about, well, where is that boundary where, I'm also, of course, trying to be very supportive and all of that, but that pushing, but supporting, that pushing, but comforting, kind of finding that balance. And hearing about the dynamic that you had, it really sounds like you had these two stars in your universe with your mother and your father, and they were both shining so brightly for you, and they gave you a really good balance of different kinds of energy that always kind of gave you what you needed in the moment, or at least made sure that when you got too much of one, the other was there. So you never felt alone. You never felt like you weren't getting the support or the encouragement you needed. How does that resonate with you? I'm just so curious because it's just such a very interesting dynamic that you grew up in.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it was, right? That
Yeah.
if I needed the push, if I needed the reminder of hey, you need to work harder here, then I had that. But if it was like, hey, it's okay that that race didn't go the way that you planned, get it together and we'll be able to do it next time. Shoot, I remember, I think I was in well, I know I was in elementary school. I don't know what grade I was in, but there was one time that I asked, and this was to my mom, I asked my mom, can I go play with my friend Chelsea? And she said, yeah, that's totally fine. You just won't get to compete this weekend, because if you haven't rode your horse every day, then you won't get to run. And I tell you what, I never asked to play again. I was like, I don't need to play then. Like, that's not a big deal to me. At that point, I could invite friends to ride with me,
Yeah.
but it was like, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I knew what my goals were. I knew I wanted to go and compete. And so it's not even like my mom took it away. She just said, no, that's totally fine. Like, here's your choice. Here's the consequences that go along with that. And she was supportive of whatever I wanted to do. It
Yeah.
wasn't like it was wrong. And I'm like, well, then I don't need friends that much. Like, like that's not a big deal to me. But I just laughed that I had these parents that in those small little comments shaped who I became.
Yeah.
You know, whether it was my dad saying that quote is it's on my brother's bathroom wall. So they shared a bathroom, and that's what's on their wall is hard work beats talent. Talent doesn't work hard because there's always going to be somebody that's more talented than you or has more money and in our world has a faster horse or a nicer horse.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, but the only thing you can control is the attitude that you have and the hard work that you put in to that sport. And yeah, I was very lucky to have parents that continue to and still continue to this day to embrace that concept of, yeah, your legs don't work. And I can't tell you that I'm not at a disadvantage because I definitely am. But what can we do to get you competitive to where you want to be regardless?
Yeah.
And and they're both supportive in that.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. And that's something that I think is really, I think back about my own childhood. And it's funny how you think about the things that were difficult, you think about the kind of tough love that you've received. And sometimes, at least for me personally, I kind of find myself going, yeah, well, I become stronger and I've become able to do the things that I've done, definitely in part because of the way that my parents were with me. But at the same time, you're kind of looking for something that's a little bit of an easier way to teach that lesson, without pushing too hard. But then you realize that it really does come down to some of those situations where you have to make those tough choices. And there is no easy. It's no like, oh, well, you can have this and this. It's really how bad do you want it? What are you willing to give up for it? How much does it mean to you? And it really sounds like that you were able to kind of take that encouragement and take that kind of tough love and really help it kind of drive you in the direction that you wanted to go very successfully with their love and support. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I heard this quote the other day that is greatness is not fast food. And I'm like, that's what it is. I mean, that there is no shortcut, right? Because I tell myself all the time, I learn every lesson the hard way. I build everything the hard way. And then I saw that quote. I don't even know where I saw it, but I'm like, that's it. That is it. Like you can't be great. You can't build an empire on a shortcut.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I did want to touch on this a little bit about the accident and the recovery process that you went through. So I do know that, of course, on January 10th, 2010, you had that horrific car accident, and ended up in the hospital. And after surgery, all of these things that happened, and you had to go through that tough rehabilitation. And one of the things that just stuck with me, it really jumped out at me as a parent going through. I mean, it was all very hard to watch, of course, and it's not something that I can say I understand or I can relate to, or it's just like wow, just watching it, and I just having the respect and the understanding that you are an amazing person. Your parents, are amazing. You've had some really good support to help you through this, but what a tough journey. And I just recall one of the things that made my heart stop for a second was when you were told, or when your father is told by the hospital, that in order to transport you back, they need to fly you. And it was not covered by insurance. And it was like $25,000 or something like that to get you back to Provo. And living on an island here, we have a situation where we live on what's called an outer island. So the big island is not where the capital is. It's not where the main city is. So a lot of the all of the big hospitals are on Oahu, where the main city is. And it's something that really not only shocked me, it just made me start doing my own research. And I was like, what if, something happens here? How is that going to work if they need to transport my daughters? And I found out that's not covered. There's a completely different service you have to pay for. It's like a separate subscription. They have access to a helicopter in case of emergency to fly you to these hospitals. So I learned so much just from that. And it just really opened my eyes to, even though you have insurance, do you really have everything covered, or do you have the things that mean the most covered? So it was very eye-opening to me. And then just kind of your whole process going through that recovery. And there was something early on when your mother had mentioned in the movie that you had you didn't have good balance outside of the saddle. And that kind of it caught me aback. I was like, well, how is that possible? I mean, and of course in the documentary, not to kind of spoil everything, but it is mentioned and it is shown that you actually use the saddle to help you regain your balance. And I was just curious if you could share a little bit about that recovery experience and how that saddle came into play. And is it true that you really don't have good balance when you're not, barrel racing? Is that the case?
Oh man, that was one of like the humor twists that we threw in there because I told them that when I was in therapy when we were talking about balance. Balance is still honestly the hardest thing like physically that I deal with on and off of a horse
Yeah.
and everyday type things is the balance is not great and now the muscles don't work great. And so when I'm learning how to move my body differently, the therapists were talking about balance and things we can do with that and I said my balance is better on a saddle than anywhere else. Can we bring that in? And it really was. My balance is better on a saddle than it is anywhere else. And so it was kind of like the joke we put in there on that because, I was able to get into that saddle and all of a sudden these skills they were wanting me to do or these, I don't know what we want to call them, like practices we were doing during PT, I could now do them if I was sitting in my saddle. But if I was just sitting on my seat, or sitting on a bench or a therapy bench, it was like I couldn't do those things the same. So yeah, my balance really is better on a horse than it is or in a saddle than it is anywhere else. And I still think that plays to this day, which is kind of a funny part of the concept. But I mean, you just find where your strengths are and where you're most comfortable. And then all of a sudden that's where you bloom is in those situations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting just to think about that. And in the documentary as well, there's a scene where you are talking to a bull rider who is also had an accident and he was doubting himself, and you were a little bit further along in your recovery. And, he was just saying how I'll never be able to do what I do again. This is crazy. This whole thing is, I'm never going to be the same. I'm never going to recover. And in the documentary, you had a quote in there that said, what's crazy? 8 seconds on a bull, but you've already done that. And I just thought it's amazing how when you look at from the outside what some people are able to do, and you think of it as impossible for other people, that's their element. And it doesn't make it any easier, but it's a place they feel like they belong, and it's a place where they yearn to go back and to keep trying, and they're able to do these things that seem impossible, but they come with a love and a respect, and with, like you said, no shortcuts, no fast food, and everything else that goes into that process. And I thought that was an amazing kind of counter to what you were explaining before about how that balance that you have, some people may think that's something that, oh, well, you're born with it and it just came completely natural. But certainly being exposed to horses so early on, it really, I'm sure, helped that saddle kind of became a place where, that was home for you, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that applies to everybody.
Yeah.
My mom always tells us, you bloom where you're planted because you don't always get to pick where you're going to be planted. So you better just bloom in that adversity and in that environment because I like you can't always pick where that is. I mean, I get to have that on the back of the horse, but when I'm not on the back of the horse, I'm in my wheelchair. So I need to bloom there too. And I think that is really what it applies to everybody is there's some situations you get to choose and there's some situations that you don't get to choose. But regardless of which one that you're in, make sure you do your best to shine or bloom while you're in that situation. And that was one of the things that me and his real name's Talon, that bull rider, that we've even discussed since then is, this wasn't necessarily what we had planned for our lives, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of them. It doesn't mean that our life is over or that it can only begin when we walk again. I mean, we're now 14 years down the road and there's so much that me and him have been able to do since our accident because we were willing to look at the future versus the past of, I'll only have my life back if I have my legs back. And that's not the way you can look. You have to look for the possibilities of what you can do regardless.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And going back to the documentary, there were so many wonderful gems just in terms of quotes in this movie that really just got to me. And just one of the other things so related to what you're saying right now, there's a scene where your mother in the movie says that the chair can either be your wings or it can be your anchor, you decide, right? And that sounds like exactly what you're saying. It's all about what we can take with us and how we're going to take it forward, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all perspective. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be a chair. It doesn't have to be a disability. I
Yeah,
mean, it can be anything. I feel like all of us face stuff, whether it's on the inside or the outside. And so you just have to decide, I mean, is that going to debilitate you, or is that going to give you a stepping stone in order to be something better? And every person has that choice every time.
that's absolutely true. And there's something that you said in the documentary as well. And I'm sure this is something that I've seen you say over and over again about attitude. And one of the things that I like to try to emphasize to people too, and it's something that I think when you say it to someone, they may take it as if you figured it out. But what I try to express when I mention this to people is that it's always work in progress. It's always 1 minute at a time. It's always one day at a time. But having the ability to come back to your attitude is so important, especially when things get turned upside down in your life. And you mentioned, I'm paraphrasing, but you had mentioned in the documentary, you said that I realize maybe I won't have control over every situation in my life, but when I wake up in the morning, I get to decide my attitude. And if that's the only decision I get to make that day, I better make it a good one. And I'm sure, like everyone, you have terrible days and you have really rough mornings. And I would just love if perhaps you could share a little bit about that process that you kind of go through to get back in that frame of mind and to kind of silence all of the, if there's negativity out there or noise, or maybe you're coming off of a day that didn't go well, just kind of how you ground yourself and kind of hit that reset button every morning.
I think one of the things I like to share the most with people is that it's okay to have a bad day.
Yeah.
I think that our world tries to tell us that you have to be positive every day and you have to be the most uplifting and happy person, but life is hard
Yeah.
and it is not fair. It's not going to be fair. And so you can have bad days. So first I like to share with people that it's okay. It's okay, whether it is that bad day or that bad minute or bad hour or really the whole day. That is okay.
Yeah.
But you have to decide what you're going to do next. And so for me, I'm always setting goals. I'm always having things that I want to do. Shoot, I even just daily I make lists of things that I just want to accomplish that day. Like they can be to-do lists, yeah, but they're also goal lists, right? This is what I want to accomplish today. And I find myself feeling fulfilled when I get to cross stuff off that list. And that's so simple. That seems like the simplest task, but you need to teach your mind and you need to teach yourself that those are little accomplishments. And
Right.
so that deserves the celebration, that deserves that feeling of triumph and not belittling what you do every day. I mean, sometimes surviving the day deserves to be celebrated. And
Right.
so I really try to train myself mentally to do that, to reward myself for accomplishing whatever daily tasks I need to do. Of course, I have my big goals, right? With walking and with my horses and with speaking and everything, right? I have those big goals, of course.
Yeah.
They matter. They're important to me. But the little daily ones are also as important because those are the ones that continue to build who I am
Yeah.
and give me the attitude and shape me into being the person who's ready to accomplish the big ones. So, I mean, I feel like that's the biggest bit of advice I can give people is feel the success of every day because that's how you get to have that mentality of being a winner, of being somebody who is happy, of somebody who is accomplished. And gosh, you can just build on that over and over and over.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice, and I think it's so true what you're saying about how it's easy for people to get hung up on when things don't go well and to kind of let that carry over into your next day or your next task or whatnot. But it's so important to decouple the results from the effort involved in all of the things that you're doing to kind of move things forward and just accept that some things are not going to go as planned. But, if you're able to do your best and you're able to continue to push yourself forward and cross those things off on your list, I think that's another brilliant piece of advice that you shared there. That's proof that you are moving forward, you are making progress. And it should definitely reinforce that attitude that, hey, I am capable of doing difficult things. I am capable of getting things done. Every now and then, perhaps something doesn't go the way that I want, but that's okay. Look at everything else I've accomplished, and here we go again. Let's just keep at it. So I think that's brilliant advice. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
So, what is next? Before I know I definitely want to respect your time, but what we are starting 2024 at the time of this recording. What's out there for Amberley Snyder in 2024?
Well, I'm hoping to get my good horse that I rodeo on healthy. He got hurt last summer, so we're just getting him back into shape. So if he's healthy and good to go, then it'll be the goal to make Wilderness Circuit Finals again this year. I continue to have the goal of speaking in all 50 states. I'm at 43, so I'm getting pretty close. So I'll continue to have that goal in place. Man, I always want to say, like, kind of continue to just build an empire. So whether that's through social media or in the rodeo world or the speaking world, I have a charity that I've started. It's still in the fundraising stages, but want to be able to build that at some point. Just whatever it takes to make 2024 the greatest year yet.
Well, if there's anything I can do, have you been to Hawaii yet? Have you
I've
spoken?
been to Hawaii, but I
Oh
haven't
man,
but I haven't spoken Hawaii, so that
oh,
doesn't
okay.
count.
Let's make that
Yes.
happen. So
So
let's.
I need to come and speak in Hawaii because it doesn't count if I've just visited. It has
That's
to be that I
right.
spoke there.
That's right. And the Big Island where I happen to be is the rodeo capital of the Hawaiian Islands. So this is where you'd want to go. I'm just saying, Parker Ranch is here, everything is here. So, but that would be fantastic if I could help serve that mission in any way possible. I definitely would love to help with that. So
Yeah, let's get that figured out and I'll get to check it off my list.
wonderful, wonderful. And before we go, where would you like people to go to learn more about the work that you're doing now? Where's the best place you'd like people to go?
You can find about my story on my website, amberleysnyder.org. Of course, you can watch my movie on Netflix, Walk Ride Rodeo. You can follow all of my social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think that's what all the kids are doing now. I'm sure there's more, but I think that those are the ones that I'm caught up on. You can find me on all of those. I try to be pretty active on those. You can write me messages and I do respond, or at least I get to read them. So you can find me on there and, of course, follow along with the journey.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put all of those links to all of those places in the show notes for everyone. And Amberly, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I was so looking forward to getting the chance to speak with you today. And thank you for sharing all those wonderful words of wisdom with our audience today as well. And I do look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to help you come out and host a talk here on the Big Island of Hawaii one day.
Sounds great to me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast. If you liked what we've explored on this episode, then you'll love the Manifest Your Greatness coaching program. The Manifest Your Greatness coaching program is uniquely tailored to help support you on your journey to become the absolute best version of yourself. So if you are committed to taking the steps required to significantly and permanently level up in any area of your life, visit manifestyourgreatness.com/contact. Again, that's manifestyourgreatness.com/contact and schedule your free consultation call today. Talk soon.